Did you know that the featherboards you have in your shop could potentially be dangerous? I purchased 3 different styles of featherboards and put them through a series of 5 tests to figure out which one was actually the best. In my opinion, of course. I got 3 different styles of featherboards. We got the traditional style featherboard. We have the very popular hedgehog style featherboard, as well as a bow foam featherboard. This video is not sponsored. I purchased all these featherboards myself to see which one I thought was the best. And if you'd like to pick one of these up, I'll put links in the description below to all of these. Let's put them through the ultimate test. So 2 reasons you want to get a featherboard for your table saw. It keeps the stock pushed against the fence while you make the cut. That way you get accurate cuts every time. Or you can use them at the bandsaw as well as the router table. Another main reason for featherboards is to help prevent or at least slow down kickback that may happen during the course of cutting. And that's what all 3 of these are designed to do, one of those 2 purposes. They all come with these miter bars that expand when you tighten down these knobs. So they all function very similar. This is a PowerTech brand, but it's the more traditional style. That's the one we'll start with. So the first test we're going to do is how fast each one of these are adjusted. How fast can you untighten these knobs, move the featherboard where you want it, tighten it back up, and then make the next cut. We'll do that with all 3, see which one comes out on top. Let's go. So to adjust a featherboard, you never want to put it at the blade or behind the blade. That's going to cause a kickback or a pinch because it's going to be pushing the cut piece into the blade. You want it in front of the blade. The way I recommend setting these up is you're going to set it to the piece of stock and then you're going to press until you see those feathers bend. Once they start bending, then you can tighten these knobs down. When the board is passing through, you should see those feathers giving way, and that is actually putting pressure against the fence and hopefully helping this pressure coming backwards. You want it tight enough that it's going to put pressure against the board, but not so tight that it causes a bind where you can't push it. So while using the traditional style featherboard, it adjusts fairly quickly, not as quick as the hedgehog did, but I really don't care for these individual miter bars that are in there. It worked and it tightened up just fine. I didn't have any issues there. As you can see, it just took a couple of seconds to adjust it to the right size. Now, obviously, I could leave these things adjusted and just keep ripping the same piece, just move the fence over, but I did want to show how long it takes to adjust each one. Next was this hedgehog featherboard. This little miter bar is kind of short, and there's only a couple of these teeth that actually make contact with the board. It's putting a pressure against the fence at those points where they're getting touched. But on the bow, as well as the traditional style, you're getting much more points of contact. Also, you may notice that when I'm using this, it slipped several times and this knob was tight. And I tightened it down just an 1/8 turn more or less than that, and it still slipped again. I've noticed that on using these in the past, that if they're not extremely tight, they will slip on you, and it gives up some of the pressure you've previously applied. Now the bow featherboard operated very similar to the traditional style. You got 2 knobs you have to tighten down. You have to set that each time, each end, and that's one of the drawbacks to the traditional style is you need to try to get them fairly square to the fence so that you get equal pressure all the way through the cut. It's not a big deal. It only takes a couple of seconds to set up, but as you see, it took about the same amount of time to adjust as the traditional style. All right, the way I'm gonna set this next test up, we're gonna judge how much pressure or how many pounds of pressure it takes to move it once the featherboard is engaged. And how I'm gonna do that is we're gonna go ahead and set this up as much pressure as I can get against that board before I start pulling. And then I'll focus the camera on the scale and then pull 3 times with equal pressure. That way we get an average of the 3. And I'm sure this scale is highly accurate. I bought it off Amazon. All right, as tight as they can go. Push it to engage it. When it moves, that's when we'll stop. Look, right there. Start again. Looks like about 26 or 27 pounds. Now we're going to test the hedgehog and see how much pressure it can withstand. All right, I tightened that down as much as I can possibly get it. We're on 0, pull number 1. And you can see these are really flexed too. Pull number 2. Starting to slip at 13. Pull number 3. Slipped. Slipped. All right, last but not least is the bow feather board. We're gonna try that one. I think it's slipping a little there. Full slide at 50 pounds. Second pull. Slipping a little at 8, 10 pounds. £23 at sliding. So you may notice on the bow feather board that when I initially pull back, it slips a tiny bit at about the 10 or 12 pound mark. After that initial slip, you see that these hinges, what Bo calls the living hinge, they actually start engaging. And once they get engaged like that and locked down, it's extremely hard to pull, and that's when you see those numbers go way up. You see here on the screen how much pressure I had to pull back on those after the living hinge engages. Where the plastic ones, once you start pulling and it starts slipping, it's just gonna slip from then on. It doesn't re-engage. These re-engage and help really secure that board. Just out of curiosity, a few weeks ago, I made these jigs that hold these feather boards to create vertical pressure. I set one of these up along with the horizontal pressure just to see how much difference it would make. And as you see here, it did allow for more resistance to be pulling against it before it started to move when you use both of them together, which kind of makes sense. One thing I noticed with the Hedgehog again is that it's moving after I get it set and tightened down. When you start pushing, it actually relaxes some of the pressure because of the way it's moving away from your body toward the blade. It's rolling because this thing is half round. It just pushes it the direction that it's going. There's really no way to lock that in. I tightened this knob down as tight as I could get it and it's still moving. Now, just a general perception of me just pulling on these by hand, what I take away is these plastic ones, they just slide on these much, much easier. The Hedgehog slides fairly easy and it doesn't offer much resistance as far as me pulling on it. The traditional style, because there's more teeth contacting, I can feel a little bit of more resistance, but it's still, because this is slick plastic, it just slides on it like butter. And then the foam ones actually grip quite a bit more. If you can see my arm popping veins there just pulling on this, it's not impossible to pull it as we saw with the scale, but it does offer a lot more resistance in my opinion. So the next test I want to know is how much pressure it takes to move a board laterally. In other words, against the feather board itself. We'll start in the same order. I've got a digital depth gauge set up here right on the edge of that board. I've marked my fence so that the board gets put at the same place every time. And then I've also marked the board right here so that I know that the first tooth on the feather board will contact the board at the same place every time so that we get the same leverage every time to try to keep this as equal as possible. I will zero this out. Now I want to know how many pounds it takes to get to 1/4 inch. That's kind of my theory here. I think it just popped. All right, next we're going to set up the bow feather board. I actually expect this to compress a little bit more, but just because it's foam. I had to pull pretty good. I can't see the number, so we'll have to look at the footage there. But I was pulling pretty good just to get that to get to 1/4 inch. All right, now here's the fun part. Don't try this at home. I think I'm going to be able to generate a kickback like this. I do have the regular feather board set up, and we'll try that and see what happens. That's what I was looking for. So that generated quite the kickback, and as you can see here on this piece, you can see where the blade went across this piece and did exactly what a kickback does, which is go up and over the blade and then back at you. Next, we will do the Hedgehog. So I ran all three of them through and I got the similar results. I actually expected that because the feather board is only on the front side of the blade. Everything on the back side of the blade is where the boards are twisting and causing the kickback, and you can't put the feather board up there because it'll cause pinching and things like that. So it'll actually cause a kickback. These will hold your work against the fence. The only benefit of these for kickback is if it pinches, and I tried to simulate it several times. I may try a couple more times just to see what happens, but so far I haven't been able to duplicate that. So I'm going to try to simulate a pinch with one of the other Bow feather boards on the far side, and I've got an angle, so hopefully it'll push the piece together and pinch that blade and cause a kickback. It is tight, tight, tight right there. I can't push it any further. So one of the main concerns is what happens if these contact a blade, whether they get drug into the blade, they come loose, whatever the reason. You're standing back here. We're going to simulate this piece of plywood as you, and it's about an equal distance away from the saw as what you would be most of the time. I'm going to be safely behind a shield with a face mask. So I was actually surprised I wasn't able to generate a kickback with the pinch test, but I believe the reason that is because the feather boards were doing what they're supposed to do. Now, is it impossible to get a kickback? Absolutely not. In the right situation, the board will kick back and it could cause you harm. A feather board is only there as an extra level of protection. It is not a fix-all for everything. Make sure you got your riving knife in and make sure you're pushing correctly on the board to prevent kickback. The main purpose of the feather board is to push the wood against the fence, as I talked about earlier. One of the things that surprised me, but kind of didn't surprise me, was when I made contact with the blade with the feather board, the plastic one's pieces went everywhere. As a matter of fact, some ended up over by the gym equipment, a good 10 or 15 feet away from the saw, which means it was probably airborne for quite a while with a pretty good little speed to it. You can see the footage on the slow down when they all hit the blades. The shards are going everywhere, so if that happens when you're in the shop, it's not going to be a good day if one of those shards hits you in the face, arms, body, anything like that. Because those things come off like shards of glass. They're very sharp. On the other end of the spectrum, the Bow feather board performed like I thought it would. It's just foam, so it just basically just fell off and laid right beside the blade. One piece fell off or flew out of there. A foam piece hitting you is not going to hurt near as bad as a sharp plastic piece. Another thing worth noting is the plastic pieces pushing against the wood is compressing those wood fibers. It's marring the wood. In other words, if you stain that, you're going to have a marred surface. It's not going to come out good. It's going to be streaked, and it's just not going to take that stain very well because it is compressing those wood fibers. The foam, on the other hand, is not compressing like that, so it's not going to mar that wood. So if you're staining your projects, I would absolutely go with the Bow. I think my top pick is going to go to the Bow. I think that's the best performing feather board we've seen today in all the tests, or most of the tests anyway. The second place would go to the traditional style feather board. I don't really care for it as much as the Bow, but if you have one of those, it still works. That's fine. The Hedgehog, I don't care for it. I don't like how it moves. It never stays tight. They claim one-handed operation, but I really can't see a place where you're able to actually rotate that by hand, get it tight, and then also tighten down that knob. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work well anyway. That was super cool. I gotta give a big shout out to Mike Taylor from TayTools.com who helped me come up with the ideas for all of these tests. If you'd like to show Mike some support, I got links in the description to his store, as well as some of the feather boards you saw today. I'm able to purchase these type tools and do these type tests because of the support of our Patreon and channel members. And with that support, they get access to behind the scenes content nobody else gets to see, member only live streams, and some other cool perks. So if you'd be interested in joining that, link in the description below to both of them. You got to check out that video right there where I made 5 jigs for your table saw using the Bow feather boards. They're phenomenal. Go check them out. Click at that box. Click at the box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Also, one of my other favorite videos right there.